Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with us, Your Excellency. It's really great to be here at the embassy, and we're here, of course, to talk about the developments in Nagorno-Karabakh and the conflict that's happening there. And first of all, we wanted to talk with you about the recent developments because there has been a Russian intervention and there has been a peace settlement, or at least a conflict resolving settlement reached between the Armenian government and Azerbaijani government. And I was wondering what your perspective on this was.
First of all, we have to state clearly that this conflict, this war, this aggression was fueled and inspired by Erdogan, by Turkey. It is crystal clear. I mean, with the overwhelming, the whole command of the Azerbaijani armed forces was done by Turkish general staff. The Turkish general staff was operating drones. The Turkish military were transporting mercenaries from Syria and from Libya to Azerbaijan to fight against Armenia. So this is, and the amount of the war crimes committed by the jihadist mercenaries, by the Azerbaijani army, by the Turkish commandos, it's amount to several cases, not only in ICC. So this should be crystal clear. So the Artsakh army, with support of Armenia, was fighting Turkish and Azerbaijani army and jihadist mercenaries. This is the first thing I want to mention here. The second part, the statement signed by the leaders of Armenia, Russia, and Azerbaijan. This is solely its sole aim and goal is cessation of hostilities, which is case now for more than 8 days, and Russian peacekeeping forces are being deployed for 8 last days throughout the line of contact that was established as a consequence of the aggression. And the civilians started to return to their homes, but we should understand that several thousand people are just out of their homes, and with the currently Azerbaijani and Turkish troops and mercenaries on the spot, it's physically impossible for them to return. So first point that should be addressed is the humanitarian problem.
Yeah, we
want
to ask you a question on that because there has been a shelling of civilians from. There's been a lot of shelling of Armenian civilians who lived in the Nagorno-Karabakh area. There's also reports of Azeri civilians who have been hit by shelling from the Armenian army. Do you see this as a conflict where both sides have faults, or do you have a different?
Some people say that it's a collateral damage, which I do not agree with that. First of all, the Artsakh army, before firing to the legitimate military targets within the settlements, were warning that we are going to fire to that legitimate military targets. They have published 6, at least in 2 major cities, Barda and Ganzak, the legitimate military targets which were supposed to hit and were hit. And no independent investigation, no journalist, no photo, even government provided photo was shown of the consequences of that hitting. I'm sorry, but Artsakh army doesn't have any guilt that those military targets were built within the civilian areas. Another allegation that Armenian army used the cluster munitions against Azerbaijan, it's completely false. First, because Armenians doesn't have any cluster munition, we don't have launching systems. Azerbaijan has it in its arsenal, the LoRa, Israeli-made LoRa missile launching system, which is designed for cluster munitions. In Nagorno-Karabakh, the use of cluster munitions by Azerbaijan was documented by an independent UK-based NGO, Hello Trust. By the way, there is a Dutch guy in the team. And in Azerbaijan, it was only the conclusions were made based only on the government-provided photo and video materials. No independent journalist, only Turkish and Azerbaijani journalists were allowed to decide where supposedly those cluster munitions were used. I do not agree that it is collateral damage. It's crystal clear that civilian infrastructure was targeted by drones, by military aviation, by artillery from Azerbaijan. So that is again a war crime, and it's very deplorable that NATO technology was used to attack civilians and civilian infrastructure within Armenia and in Artsakh.
Okay, on that front, NATO, of course, the Netherlands is a member of NATO, and so is Turkey. And in the last month, however, there have been critical voices raised against the way Azerbaijan and Turkey have conducted themselves in the war, including the use of Syrian mercenaries. How do you see the role of the Netherlands, and also as an ambassador to the Netherlands, what role do you play?
I can welcome yesterday motions adopted by the Tweede Kamer on the imposition of personal sanctions against Aliyev family and entourage, and also those responsible in Azerbaijan and Turkey for the war crimes and complicity in this aggression. Today, President Aliyev was receiving Dutch ambassador, and he simply cheated on his public, saying that Dutch parliament adopted motions on the sanctions against Azerbaijan. That's not true. The motions are individual against his family, his entourage, for launching the aggression and the war crimes. So this should be very clear. There is Azerbaijan as a country, as people, we don't treat them as enemies. Our problem is the corrupt government of Azerbaijan and Turkey, and they should be punished for that. And I do welcome this initiative adopted by the majority at Tweede Kamer. I do hope that this will be also done by a number of other democratic states. We cannot allow two bloodthirsty dictators to dictate their will on the democratically elected governments and people. So my point is that now the Netherlands should provide with a roadmap to its parliament, because it's a demand of the Dutch public expressed via parliament, how it's going to proceed to impose those sanctions, EU-wide or nationwide. I'm not a lawyer, I cannot comment on that. It's an internal issue of the Netherlands. But as an Armenian diplomat, as someone from Nagorno-Karabakh himself, whose home was also shelled by a Smerch missile cluster munition, and it was landed just 1 meter away from my home in a village in the north of Nagorno-Karabakh. I can only welcome these developments.
Yeah, and the Dutch foreign minister has said also recently, in response to the adoption of parliament, that an independent investigation should be conducted. I heard in one of your earlier answers that you already said there has been independent footage of war crimes committed.
Exactly.
Do you think that there should be maybe a NATO-led investigation, or maybe a UN-sanctioned investigation?
For the NATO-led investigation, for OSCE-led investigation, we need a consensus. To go with these issues to NATO and OSCE, it's a deadlock. Because we have at least one country in NATO and at least two countries within OSCE which will block the decision. Yeah. So I prefer it to be an EU or UN-led investigation. But believe me, Azerbaijan will not allow any investigation on its territory unless it's not imposed to allow. It's not forced to allow. And sanctions are the greatest tool to do that.
Yeah, and how would you respond to if you talk to this issue about this issue to many people who are more on the Turkish or Azeri side? They point out to the two resolutions, for instance, the Council of Europe resolution in 2005 and the infamous UN resolution that both regarded Nagorno-Karabakh as Azeri territory.
First of all, let's be very clear. UN Security Council resolutions in 1993, the sole aim of those resolutions was stopping of hostilities. There were 7 adjacent regions out of Nagorno-Karabakh, but the resolutions are only 4. Why? Someone should ask the question. Because each time after each resolution, Azerbaijan under Heydar Aliyev was refusing to comply with the terms of the resolution and was launching counterattacks. That's why for the other regions we don't have any resolution. The Security Council was tired of calling calling upon Azerbaijan to stop the hostilities. As concerns the Nagorno-Karabakh, in UN Security Council resolutions we have a clear recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh as a separate entity because there is a reference on the local Armenian forces. The only request to Armenia is to exercise its influence over the local Armenians to stop the hostilities, which Armenia effectively did. And later in 1994 joined the ceasefire between Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh as guarantor of security of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. That's my answer. And as concerns the resolution of Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, you have your famous countryman Peter Omzicht, who is one of the outspoken MPs who revealed all this caviar diplomacy and bribing mechanism within Council of Europe and within Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, and he gave many interviews on that subject. I suppose you can understand how those resolutions were adopted, which is not the case in the Dutch Parliament, by the way. And today, President Aliyev was complaining about Dutch Parliament, saying this and this. But guys, he should understand that no, we cannot continue business as usual. I mean, what Azerbaijan and Turkish authorities pretend that we will sit and then Eastern Partnership, EU, they will close the eyes to all these war crimes. No, it's done. The EU, the West, and the democratic countries should turn all these realities as a nightmare to these corrupt regimes. And Dutch Parliament took a first step towards that.
Yes, and in your role as ambassador, I think you have contact with like the Dutch members of parliament, of course. And how do you conduct your diplomacy in this regard? My main tool for conducting diplomacy and presenting the tool are the phone calls. But to get a phone call from a Dutch parliament member, you have to wait very long. But I'm trying to do my best. I mean, sometimes I'm sending emails if it's too urgent, but my main tool is the phone calls, video calls, etc. And physical meetings. Also, I didn't meet any Dutch parliamentarian for months, I would say. And my counterparts at the foreign ministry are also on a daily contact. And your new ambassador to Armenia is doing also a great job on reporting the realities from Armenia. I'm pretty much sure that your ambassador from Baku is doing the same. So that's my tools of diplomacy. I mean, communicating. And do you also talk to the Armenian diaspora that may be present here?
Of course.
Do you think they play a large role in the conflict? Because you see, especially when you look, for instance, at the Netherlands, we have a sizable Turkish population. You see that there are still a lot of tensions also in the West, in the diaspora.
My primary request to our diaspora is that you are citizens of the Netherlands. This is the first and foremost. I'm grateful for you taking care about Armenia, but do nothing to transfer the tensions from the Caucasus to the Netherlands. It's counterproductive, and it is not good thing. And I do believe that they understand and they hear my calls, which is not the case, for example, with Azerbaijan. In July, the ambassador organized counter manifestation inside Azerbaijani embassy against Armenians and was tweeting that we have organized manifestation to bring confrontation to the streets of The Hague. And I'm also surprised by the lack of public reaction from the Dutch Foreign Ministry on the blatant violation of Vienna Convention rules by the Azerbaijani embassy as well.
Oké. Wat hebben we nu gedaan?
Nu 15,5 minuten.
Okay. So I think we have two more questions
Yeah,
that we
please go
want
ahead.
to discuss. One was we already started with the current ceasefire, and it seems to have been given a lot of tensions also in Armenia with the alleged plot to kill the prime minister, for instance. How do you see these political developments in Armenia itself?
You know, the outcome of this aggression for Armenia itself is very disastrous, psychologically and physically. We have more than 2,000 casualties. So can you imagine that? And it's natural that there should be popular protest, but in a democratic society, you should have a dialogue. So that's why now the government and the opposition both call for unity and for a dialogue to find a solution out of this situation. And I don't want to name any other country, but the protest, that's normal. I mean, it's a popular protest. Yeah, the people is not happy with the developments, and they are protesting. That's very natural. I mean, the only thing that we should avoid any kind of violence, any kind of non-constitutional development.
But do you think that eventually the Armenian people will come to see that the government is making a correct assessment, or do you think that this might cause further tensions within Armenia itself?
As for now, I see that there is some, so to say, how to put it very correctly, there are some trends for dialogue. It's not as much as I would wish to see, but nevertheless, I see some trends of dialogue.
Okay. And, well, we always want to end, of course, with an outlook into the future.
Yeah.
And the conflict itself, it seems that it has reached some kind of stalemate, but it is far from over, as it has been lingering on for decades. How do you see the next developments? What do you think will happen?
I fully agree with you that we should envisage next development. For example, 2 days ago, President Aliyev rejected any status of Nagorno-Karabakh. This is again, I mean, a warmongering saying. If there is no, you are not going to talk about status. So why then negotiate? We are negotiating on what we are negotiating. That's why this, you know, it should be very obvious for the whole world that the only solution now is the remedial recognition of Artsakh, as was in case of Kosovo, to save the people from complete annihilation with a clear genocidal intent. Is remedial recognition of Artsakh. To give it a status so Azerbaijan cannot treat it anymore as its own territory and commit atrocities.
But do you think, to follow up on that, do you think that's a likely scenario? Also with regards to the fact that Azeri forces have been able to occupy a large part of Nagorno-Karabakh?
Sanctions are the right way to force them to deoccupy the large territories of Nagorno-Karabakh, and to convince them that war is not solution. And I'm equally sorry for the casualties, more than 10,000 casualties on Azerbaijani side. Of course, according to independent data, about thousands of casualties are from the mercenaries, but there are more than 10,000 casualties from Azerbaijani side, only combatants. According to the data provided by Azerbaijani government, there are more than 90 casualties from civilians. I'm really sorry, but why they had, by the way, during the whole term of the conflict, Aliyev's son was in Dubai. The elder daughter was in London, and the second daughter was in Moscow. So why the families of those killed should suffer, and Aliyev can spend? By the way, the son of the Prime Minister of Armenia was on the front lines. This is the difference between democracy and autocracy.
Okay, so that is your. I think it's very clear that you envision a future only with recognition for Nagorno-Karabakh.
This is the only tool to prevent new hostilities. For example, in 5 years, if Russian peacekeepers would go, what will happen? It's crystal clear. If there is no status, they will attack again. And Russian presence, and I would like to use this opportunity also to thank Russians, because with their presence, with deployment of the peacekeepers, they prevented second Armenian genocide. That should be very clear to everyone.
I think that's a very good point to end on. Is there anything that you would like to say to
your
like,
question
our
was
viewers?
were very, I would say, well prepared and mature, and I'm really glad to be interviewed by such a professional. Very much
you very much.
appreciated.